So ever since I dropped the Yami Yugi video and then I put out the Jaden video, I knew I was gonna have to talk about this topic eventually, and that is the whole debacle that comes from the duel between Yugi and Jaden at the very end of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. This is probably one of the most controversial things that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has done, especially because they left the duel ambiguous at the very end, with Jaden saying that he needs to get stronger to duel Yugi again, but then he says gotcha, which he never says when he loses. In fact, he only says that when he wins a duel, so it leaves things a little bit ambiguous. So in today's video, we're going to kind of talk about Yugi versus Jaden in a few different ways. We're going to talk about it from like a lore aspect, we're going to talk about it from like a dueling aspect, and then talk about who should win based on their feats alone. So we're going to tackle it from a few different angles. I'm also going to be bringing in this Kuriboh theory that I'm sure a few people have heard about. So strap yourselves in. This is going to be a bit of a girthier, meaty video. But if you enjoy the Yu-Gi-Oh! Power scaling, then I'm sure you'll absolutely love it. Before we begin, if you have not already, just click that like and that subscribe button. What are you doing, bro? We're out here uploading the power scaling content for the boys. And if you enjoy that type of content, give your boy that like and that subscribe. You can also click that join button to become a channel member if you really like what I do and you feel like you want more content, because channel members get access to debates that I upload and they get access to all past live streams. But if you're just absolutely starving for content, even after that, I stream over on Twitch every Monday through Friday. You can click that link down in the description down below. But with that being said, let's just kind of go ahead and get into this discussion. So let's start off with probably the most whack part, or I guess the most interesting part, and that is the Kuriboh theory. So there is a theory that this duel actually never even happened, because we know from very early on in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX that Kuriboh has this ability to send Jaden to like this alternate spirit realm where he can then duel somebody and then have a whole lot of fun. And then it kind of helps him get his dueling spirit back. And he did this early on in the series when we were dealing with the Sacred Beasts. So Kuriboh sent him to the spirit world to have him duel Kaiba-Man. And even though Jaden lost that duel, he regained his love for dueling again. Because if you'll remember, this is like right after Jaden had his life or death duel with Atticus, or Dark Atticus. And Jaden was a little down in the dumps. He also just witnessed Crowler and Zane basically die. So Kuriboh thought this would be a good way to help him get his dueling pride back, and it actually did work. So the theory goes that when Jaden goes to touch the cards in Yugi's deck, it's actually Kuriboh sending his conscience to like the spirit world again and having him duel Yugi. People use this to explain a lot of the misplays or the cheating that Atem does later on in the duel, because we blatantly see the mirror card that Atem plays and he actually uses it incorrectly. Like, it's actually 5 different layers of cheating. But considering Atem is actually pretty good at Yu-Gi-Oh!, you would expect him to not have to resort to cheating, and you would expect him to know what the cards do. And so the theory goes that the reason he's making those mistakes is because it's Kuriboh kind of sending him to the spirit realm, and you're supposed to notice those little mistakes here and there, and that's like, something's not right here, something's a little off. And that's supposed to clue you in that this is not like a normal duel. Because the whole point of this is not for Jaden to win, the whole point is that Jaden is just trying to get his love for dueling back, because all of GX, Jaden has been put through the absolute worst with having to fight Kagemaru, Sartorius, Yubel, and then Darkness. Like, everything is just getting worse right after the other. All of his friends just keep getting absolutely murked all over the place. So understandably, Kuriboh's like, you need to pick me up. But that's just the theory. It's not confirmed or anything. You can try to put that in there and combo that in with who should actually win this duel, which I guess we'll talk about now. Based on their feats alone, Jaden should absolutely smash Yugi in a duel, which I know is going to be hard for a lot of people to hear, but when you look at both of the characters, I mean, Atem's best showings are fighting these planetary characters with the Egyptian god cards and Zork. Maybe at the very best, you can say that like Zork has the power of infinite darkness, so maybe he's like an infinite 3-dimensional being. And Yugi does end up beating him with a little bit of a power from his friends, but I mean, what Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonist doesn't get help from their friends? With that little bit of help, he's able to summon Horiarty, and he's able to just completely obliterate Zork. But then conversely, you have Jaden doing that in the very first arc with the Sacred Beasts. The Sacred Beasts being said to be basically the counterpoints to the Egyptian god cards, as they're the great devils, right? Or the demons to the gods, right? And they also have the power to destroy the planet, but they have a little bit of an extra effect, whereas the Egyptian god cards are a bit more passive in the way they go about things. You know, haunting people in their dreams, or subtly advising people to not do things. Or even when they do decide to act, like they just send a lightning bolt down, which is very like casual. It's not like they're just sending a giant typhoon to destroy the entire planet. It's just like very specific, like I'm targeting that guy with one lightning bolt. Whereas the Sacred Beast literally just obliterate all of the dual monsters on the planet. Like they literally just start sucking up all of the dual spirits on the planet. Because apparently the Sacred Beasts have Black Air Force energy, and they just decide to go for the head immediately. But then the next arc, you have Jaden fighting Sartorius in the Light of Destruction, which, even if you highballed Yugi to saying that he has like infinite 3D power, the Light of Destruction also is on that level, as it is a universal destroying Light of Destruction. And then right after that, Jaden goes on to fight Yubel, who's at the bare minimum multiversal because she just creates a multiverse of 12 universes, or she's 12D if you believe that the 12 universes are also 12-dimensional constructs based on one statement that Yubel says, where she says she's going to create the 12-dimension universes. And then even after that, you have Darkness, who literally created his own multiverse, and Jaden beats that dude up. So just by feats alone, Jaden is looking far more impressive than Atem, which really shouldn't be a hot take. That's literally like me saying that I think Dragon Ball Z Goku could beat Dragon Ball Goku. You would just think it sounds pretty obvious, but again, I understand that a lot of the original Duel Monsters characters are very nostalgic for a lot of people, so people don't like to hear that they would like lose or anything, especially when the GX characters aren't super popular as well. It's kind of like saying that Sakura from Naruto could beat the 5 Kage. Even though Sakura has the feats to do it, people don't like to hear it because they like the 5 Kage more than they like Sakura by a large margin. So when you hear stuff like that, it's just like, ugh, I don't like to hear that. Like, that's not a very popular take, but it's supported by the series. Then as far as their strengths as duelists are concerned, I mean, this really isn't a slight against Yugi. It's just the fact that when we get into the GX era, the game gets way more complicated, and the game picks up in speed just by an absolute massive amount. They say that, like, Jaden is a better, more complex duelist than Yugi is just really a product of their time. It's going to be the same for every duelist that comes after Jaden. I would say that Yusei is a better duelist than Jaden is. I would say that Yuma, for all of his faults, is better than Yusei. Then you'd say that Yuya is better than that. Just because the game keeps getting more and more complex. And just off the basis of the game getting better and better, or more complex and worse in some people's eyes, that's just going to have to make the quality of duelists better. Where in Duel Monsters, you really don't even have archetypes. Like, Yugi's got about like 7 different archetypes in his deck, where he's got like Dark Magicians, he's got Magnet Warriors, he's got Gaia, Black Luster Soldier, then he's got like Curse of Dragons floating in there, then like the random Imp monsters are in there, Giselle is in there, you've got a Catapult Turtle in there, a Giant Soldier of Stone, and like there's not a whole lot of synergy. If you try to run these decks today in that same style, you're not going to get very far, where at least when you get to GX, people have a pretty well-founded deck that revolves around one archetype. For instance, Jaden only runs basically elemental heroes, and then he adds the Neospatians into his deck, and then has Neos kind of be the bridge between them, because Neos can contact fuse with any of the Neospatians, but then Neos also functions as an elemental hero card as well. So even though you could say that there's 2 archetypes in there with the elemental heroes and the Neospatians, they're 2 archetypes that work very well together. Or like how Zane runs Cyber Darks and Cyber Dragons, there's 2 archetypes in his deck, but they work together. Atticus, a top tier character in GX, also just runs the Red Eyes deck. You know, Sartorius runs Arcana Force, Kagemaru runs Sacred Beasts, Yubel runs like Plant Yubel Weird deck, Cyrus runs Roids, Dino Bro runs obviously Dinosaurs, Supreme King Jaden runs Evil Heroes. Like, they all just have a very core archetype about them, whereas Duel Monsters was kind of like, you just build the best deck you can, and then you have kind of like a boss archetype in there. Because even someone like Kaiba, who's my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh character, has a very like mishmashy deck. If you were to look at it now, you'd be like, dude, you got like Vorse Raider, XYZ's in here, Blue Eyes in here, and you've got like Petins in here, and you've got like Ryukushin Powered. You have like 60 different strategies going on, which was kind of good for that era because you just wanted to run good generic cards because, you know, like Vorse Raider's like 1900 attack. He's got good stuff in there, just like Negate Attack, Ring of Destruction, just generic good cards. But it just doesn't fly anymore, and that's kind of why you see in the duel between Jaden and Yugi, Jaden actually puts in about 5 different cards that allows Yugi to draw his cards for himself, because if he didn't do that, if the producers didn't write the duel in that way, where Jaden added cards that allowed Yugi to draw cards, then Jaden would just be way too fast for Yugi to keep up with, just because of the styles of gameplay. And if you don't believe me, feel free to go get one of your buddies or hop in the Discord, because we do have a Yu-Gi-Oh channel now in the Discord. Feel free to come in there, bring a Yami Yugi or a Seto Kaiba deck, and then I or somebody else in there will go ahead and just run Jaden's Elemental Heroes, Cyber Darks by Zane, Atticus's Red Eyes deck, the Sacred Beast deck from Kagemaru, any one of those decks. And it's almost a 100% win rate on the side of the GX and further characters, because we've tested this extensively. I wanted to see if Yugi even had a chance, and we've used his deck numerous times to try to beat any of the other protagonists, and it just does not hold up, because that's just this nature of the game. The game just gets faster, and we get better and better cards that Yugi just doesn't have access to. So then we really come down to lore. And this is where you can actually debate things. And this is where I think a lot of people get caught up on, because Jaden has the better feats. He's obviously from just a superior era because he's just later on in the show's history. It's just going to be a natural consequence of the show continuing to go on. Like, as I said, each protagonist is just going to get better and better because the game is getting more complex and they're just going to get access to better and better cards. But the lore is really where people are probably getting tripped up, because Atem in the Yu-Gi-Oh verse is kind of held as like the best duelist in history. Like, he's kind of like the first main guy, the first pharaoh that started kind of like duel. He's got like a lot of that lore around him, which is really what props him up a lot of the time. But my problem with that is that the whole point with the ceremonial duel was that Yugi Moto had now surpassed the pharaoh Atem, and he allowed Atem to go to the spirit realm, and he takes over as the king of games. So really, a lot of the awe and a lot of the praise should be going to Yugi Moto. Like, he should be getting a lot of that clout, but it's probably because we didn't get to see Yugi Moto do a lot of the cool things that Atem did, right? Like, Atem's pretty much taking over for all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel monsters, and Yugi Moto is kind of just the backseat character. And then after he wins the duel, the series literally ends like that episode. He doesn't get to do anything cool. And this is a critique that I have of GX, but Yugi Moto, Joey, and Seto Kaiba, they really don't do anything in GX when they probably should have been more active. In fact, a take that I have about GX is that Atticus probably should have just been Joey. If you just put Joey in there, it makes the other cast look so much better. Because if you look at the stuff that Atticus does in the series and how strong he is, even end of series in GX when he's fighting Dark Fujiwara and basically forces him into a tie, if that was Joey, by extension, that makes Kaiba and Yugi look infinitely more impressive if that was Joey, but instead they put in Atticus. And the fact that they don't have the Duel Monsters characters being very active in GX makes them look a little stinky. It kind of relegates them, and I'm sorry to say this, but it kind of relegates them to being like the Z fighters in Dragon Ball, where they're like these past very powerful characters that just don't do anything anymore. And just by the nature of power scaling, where we go off of feats and statements for the characters, if they're not doing anything, then they're just not going to be as impressive as the other characters, especially if the statements and feats from their series does not hold up. So that's generally my take on Jaden versus Yugi. I think it makes a lot more sense if Jaden just fully surpassed Yugi and they just owned up to that, because they're kind of building up to that the entire series. They essentially have Jaden do everything that Yugi does, but a little more impressive. Like, he beats the 3 Sacred Beasts, which are essentially the 3 Egyptian god cards, but evil. He defeats the Infinite Light of Destruction, as opposed to Yugi beating the Infinite Darkness and Zork. And then he goes on to fight even stronger opponents than that. And then it just feels really odd and tacked on at the very end, where they're just like, oh, and by the way, we're going to try to say that Yugi now scales back to this Jaden, by having Jaden and Yugi say that they're the strongest people they've ever dueled. It just seems a little odd. If the duel did happen, and it wasn't in some weird Kuriboh dreamland, I do acknowledge that it's probably Yugi's W. Even though Jaden says, I need to get stronger, and then he says gotcha after that, I believe it's more implied that Yugi wins the duel. But more or less what I'm saying is that it doesn't make sense from a series standpoint. And then if you take that duel out and you don't look at that and you look at just what the characters have done, it makes way more sense for Jaden to have won that duel, to be the superior duelist, and to just be stronger overall. But I'll hear you guys' thoughts in the comments down below, because I'm expecting to get a lot of people that are the Yugi simps coming in the comments being like, there ain't no way Jaden could win. But that's also why we got the Discord. Feel free to bring them Yami Yugi decks. I'll be pulling up with the elemental heroes and I'll just be clapping cheeks. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.